So let's go ahead and get started with common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Now, like I mentioned to you, these pitfalls I get from real life scenarios, and they're the things that come up most often that get agents in trouble. And I got this idea because Utah, every quarter, the Division of Real Estate puts out a newsletter with all of the, basically, those that have committed transgressions. Okay, it's kind of it serves as public humiliation and also as a notice to all the realtors out there that there is a police agency, if you will, overseeing us to make sure that we get the job done right. Now, honestly, a lot of those people in there, I can see where they would have made innocent mistakes. I've seen some of my agents' names come up. I've seen some fellow brokers that I know to be great people come up. So they're not evil people because they come up in this. They're good people. They're regular agents. They're just like me and you, that something slipped by them, okay? And it caught them by surprise, and it cost them, again, a little bit of public humiliation. It cost them some money because there were fines usually in place, and it cost them some time because they had to go take some remedial classes to be aware of that. So I'm hoping that with this training today, you guys can be made aware of some issues that are common things that catch agents up, okay? I want to start with this quote by Jim Rohn. Life in all its uniqueness would not be life without the negatives and the positives. That is why it is important to be a serious student of both. Today we're going to be a little bit of a serious student of the negatives. And like I said, it's not exciting, but I do commend you for being here because it means you take your license and your career seriously. All right, pitfall number one, implied agency. Now, this is becoming more and more of a problem. And as I go through the training, you'll see why. But let's define it first. Agency by implication occurs when an agent acts in the role of an agent, whether a contract for agency exists or not. In such an occasion, the agent may also have full liability in the transaction. Okay, what this means is that if I'm acting like an agent, then in the eyes of the law, I am the agent on record for that property. Whether I have an exclusive right to sell listing agreement or an exclusive buyer-broker agreement is irrelevant in the eyes of the law. Now, without those agreements, I'm not going to get paid. But if I'm acting like an agent, I've got liability like an agent. So how does this come into play? You guys have probably heard the story before, but I'm going to tell it again because I think it's the best example I've ever seen. In that quarterly newsletter that the division puts out, I'll never forget the time that I read of this lady. She got a fine. She got extra hours of CE credit assigned to her because her good friend was buying a home, needed some help, didn't hire this agent to help her, but the agent got involved, maybe provided a little bit of paperwork or something. The agent in some way helped her out, but didn't consider herself the agent. She was just helping a friend. Well, something went south with the transaction, and somebody complained, and the division in their investigation talked to the buyer, and the buyer mentioned her name and said, well, yeah, she was helping me. And the agent went to her and said, you misrepresented your client. She said, that wasn't a client, it's just a friend. And the agency said, no, no, no. You provided paperwork, you gave some advice, you created agency with that. You've got full liability. And kind of a sad situation. I'm sure the friend didn't mean to turn her in. It just came up in the division's investigation, but she landed in the quarterly newsletter with some fines levied against her by just helping a friend or family member. So be aware. If you're helping a friend or family member, if you provide forms, if you provide advice, if they look at you and ever thought you were their agent, you know, because they keep coming to you saying, well, now they've did this, what would you recommend here? And you're just being helpful, get yourself a listing agreement signed and charge them a little bit of money because you've got liability if you're going to do that. Or you can be the bad guy, and sometimes I am. Guys, I'll have family come to me. I've been in this business a long time. And I'll have family come to me sometimes and ask me questions, and I say, you know, I've got to charge you if I start helping you. And they're like, are you serious? Like, what kind of a jerk are you? I'm like, you know what? You're talking about putting my family's livelihood in jeopardy. I'm the income provider for my family. And no, I'm not going to risk that. I'm not going to risk my family because you're too cheap to pay. And I said, and I'll tell them, I'm not trying to make a ton of money off you. Give me $1,000, 500 to pay equity, 500 for me. And yeah, I'll get involved and help you out some. And if they're not going to do that, man, I am not that friend. I'm not the friend that puts my family's livelihood in jeopardy by giving free real estate advice that could cause me to lose my license later on. Okay, now you might think I'm a jerk and you might want to roll ahead with that and do your own thing, but it's only a matter of time. And the longer you're in this business, the more you see that this is an industry laced with litigious people that want to sue each other, people that want to cause problems. And if that happens and your name pops up, you're going to regret it. Okay, here's another one that comes up a lot, and this comes up all the time. In fact, we had a Facebook discussion here along the Wasatch Front. We have a Facebook group of agents, Equity Wasatch Front agents or something like that. Anyways, some of the agents typed in there and said, hey, this is, what do you guys do for this? And it was talking about showing homes to people without an agency agreement signed, without an exclusive buyer-broker agreement signed. And so many agents typed in there and said, well, that's the way I do it, because I don't think that it's right for us to demand that they sign an exclusive buyer-broker agreement upon first meeting us. I mean, they don't know us, we don't know them, they don't know if it's a good fit. Well, folks, that's just such a silly argument. You don't go out and list somebody's home for a couple of months while they figure out if they like you. You go out, you do your listing presentation, and you're not going to take another step. It's never going to land on the MLS without an exclusive right to sell listing agreement in place. And yet buyers agents do this all the time. They go out and show homes acting as if they were that person's agent without an agency agreement signed. Stop doing it. I don't care what your argument is about how much you love your clients and how much they love you and how much they're not going to stab you in the back. Well, in Utah, it's against the law, because the law in most cases reflects, we're a very realtor-friendly state, and so the law reflects the Code of Ethics. But the Code of Ethics, which is a national code, applies here, and it says in every case that we need to get the agency agreement signed up front. So quit thinking that you're doing your clients a service or that you're being the nice guy by not requiring an exclusive buyer-broker agreement up front. And if you don't understand how to go about that, then watch my buyer training on YouTube or join me here later. Okay, because there's a way you can get that signed every time, and you will provide more value to your client than going out and showing homes. And if you and I ever come head-to-head out in the market, and I don't compete with our agents a lot, but if I ever come head-to-head with an agent where I sit down with a client doing my buyer presentation and say, do you have any other agreements in place with other agents? And they say, well, so-and-so has shown me a whole bunch of homes, but no, I've never signed anything with them. You know what? I don't feel one bit of compassion. And if you're here listening to me today and catch yourself on the opposing side of me in this situation, I will cut you out of the deal, because I don't think that you're a good agent if you take people around and drive them around showing them homes without an agency agreement signed, because you violated the law and you violated the Code of Ethics. And if you don't know how to do it, get in and get trained on it. Because I do my buyer presentation, and 95% of the time, the buyers look at each other and say, well, John Doe never spent this kind of time with us. And I know that if you're John Doe, that you drove them around, spent hours with them. I just spent a half hour going over my buyer presentation. But the value of what I'm providing is more than what you're providing. So quit thinking that you're doing your clients a service showing homes without agency agreement signed. You're not. You're providing a disservice. And if you come head-to-head with an agent that does the buyer presentation and tells them everything that they will do for them, you'll come out on the losing end. Okay. Next, assisting a seller with paperwork in an MLS entry-only or a fee-for-service situation. Okay. Now, this is a weird one, and this is coming up across the nation. Let me go on here. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more depth. Okay. All right. We have this concept of fee for service, meaning that there's the public out there they want to hire a real estate agent, but they just want to get it on the MLS. That's something that they cannot do themselves. But they can maybe create their own websites. They can promote those websites. They can spread the word on Facebook. They can email out all of their friends. And so they don't want the agent to do any of that stuff. They can handle all the showings. They can have the phone calls directed to them. And maybe they're even comfortable enough with the paperwork that they don't want an agent to help them with the paperwork. They just want an agent's help to get it on the MLS. Well, several states have passed a minimum service requirement. So let me read this, and then I'll tell you what that is. In 2005, the U.S. Department of Justice and Federal Trade Commission voiced opposition to realtor-backed legislation enacting minimum service requirements in Alabama, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. Lawmakers in all 4 states passed the bills anyway, and federal antitrust law gives states some leeway to adopt regulations that ostensibly protect consumers, even if they have anti-competitive effects. Now, here's the problem. Okay, minimum service requirements means that the law in place says that if a realtor's involved, they have to, at a minimum, like I'll tell you Utah's state law, at a minimum, they have to have all contracts passed through them. In other words, somebody can show the home themselves, but when it comes time to make an offer, that offer has to go to the real estate agent, not to the seller. So all offers have to go through them. The realtor has to provide all the paperwork for that client. They have to review the documents for closing. They don't necessarily have to attend closing, but they have to review the HUDs to make sure that they're accurate and be available for closing if the client requires it. So there's some minimal things that we call minimum service requirements, all right? And if you read down here, although several states have since repealed minimum service requirements, the Justice Department's Competition and Real Estate website lists 11 states that still have laws on the books that restrict the ability of consumers to choose only the services they want. And if you'll look in here, there's a chance, because a lot of our agents are in these states, Missouri, Oregon, Idaho, Utah. We're in a lot of these places, guys. So, in other words, we're on the Department of Justice's short list of people that they keep a very close eye on. Now, what does this mean for us? Well, this means that the Department of Justice and the FTC could actually come after the state for trying to enforce these things if they deem that the law has an anti-competitive effect. And so how has that affected states like Utah that does have a minimum service requirement in place? Well, it affects it like this. The state just simply ignores it. So when we find people that are breaking this law, we send them to the state's investigators, and they don't do anything about it because they don't want to incur the wrath of the Department of Justice. And you go to the real estate companies' websites that break this law, they openly break the law, and they're aware of this Department of Justice thing. They've got it posted right there on their website. And so basically the state is scared to enforce its own law. In Utah, our MLS, our biggest MLS, the WFR MLS, that covers probably 80% of the agents, they used to have a rule that enforced this, and they actually got a phone call from the National Association of Realtors saying, we're going to remove all support from you and you'll have no affiliation with us whatsoever if you enforce this rule. It's not your job. You can't do it. And so our MLS had to back off of this minimum service requirement. So, in fact, this Department of Justice letter was sent to one of our politicians here in Utah, and basically it goes through and says, we've got our eye on you. Okay, as you may know, the department is one of 2 federal agencies, the other being the FTC, charged with enforcing federal antitrust laws to protect competition and consumers. Part of our mission is to share our experience evaluating policies that may affect consumers and the impact that proposed government action may have on the competitive process. The Antitrust Division has been active in preserving competition in the real estate brokerage industry. With the FTC, we published a report in April of 2007 entitled Competition in the Real Estate Brokerage Industry. We have also submitted comments to numerous state legislators and regulatory bodies on the effects of proposals in the real estate field, including minimum service requirements on competition and consumers. And then they've got this little link here. And this is the kind of thing that these companies that break these laws enforced. Now, I've also got in my possession some threat letters to the state of Missouri from the Department of Justice. So it can be a scary thing for a state to try to fight with the federal government, and they try to pick their battles wisely. This isn't one that, well, first of all, they would have to be able to prove that it harmed the consumer. And usually the consumers are so uneducated, they don't know when they're being harmed by this type of thing. So how does this affect us as agents? Well, it affects us in several ways. If there's a listing agent that's selling a home like this, we call them entry-only listings, where they just put them on the MLS and don't do any of the other things that the law requires. The law was put in place originally because buyer's agents got involved. They brought their buyer along, and then the seller said, hey, I don't have this paperwork. Can you get me a copy of the seller's disclosure so that I can provide them for you? And so the buyer's not only doing the paperwork for their buyer, but they also end up with agency by implication for the seller, because they're providing the seller with paperwork, helping them fill out the forms correctly, and they're doing it all so that they can have a smooth transaction. But they are incurring liability by their actions, by just being that friendly, helpful agent, because the agent that's listed the home wasn't paid for that service. And the client says that they didn't want that service, they didn't want to pay the extra money for that service, so they're not getting that service, but somebody's got to provide it or else the paperwork's not done correctly. So how do you protect yourself as a buyer's agent? Well, there's a couple of ways, okay? When dealing with a fee-for-service agent, make sure you have a form signed by the seller disclosing agency, okay? So we have in Utah a form that says unrepresented seller disclosure or buyer disclosure form if it's an unrepresented buyer. If it's a seller, we have a for sale by owner disclosure form. And even though they're technically listed with an agent, if you read the language in the for sale by owner form, it says in there that they're not getting helped with paperwork, and that if you do help them, you're only doing it because you're helping your buyer out. Basically, the language is going to protect you. So find a form like that that your state has, and if you're dealing with these fee-for-service agents, have them sign that form. Have them sign that for sale by owner commission agreement form, even though on the MLS they have an agent, okay? You need to protect yourself. Now, other ways. We talked about representing friends and family. Always sign that agency agreement up front, especially with friends and family. They need to know that the high level of service that you perform. We do these things because it's the highest level. So we don't want to skip these services simply because our friends and family won't demand it of us. We want to provide it with them because they'll be the ones that give us the most referrals. So we want to showcase our high level of service. In certain cases, we're going to be interacting a lot with clients that, you know, maybe it's a limited service client or a fee-for-service client like we've discussed. In some cases, in fact, I had an agent call me yesterday about this issue where the agent has posted on the MLS, don't send any offers to me. Basically, they're posting clearly, we're violating the law. But there's nothing the state's going to do about it, so they clearly post it. And they say, we are just putting it on the MLS. If you're going to do anything else with the client, showings, offers, any of that goes directly to the client. Don't bother us, okay? That client's not getting the service they need, and so they wanted to interview my agent, okay? They wanted to talk to him about listing the home, although technically they're in another contract. Now, if this were a normal listing, that would be a no-no to go talk to somebody about listing their home. But in this case, it was a request. So if you get a request like that, I would go the extra step and tell that seller, yeah, I'd love to come talk to you. Please send me an email requesting that, just so that I have a paper trail. Okay? So it may seem silly to you, but guys, we live in a country that likes to sue each other, so do these silly steps to protect your license. You don't want somebody coming after you and suing you for trying to break their agency agreement when, in fact, their agency agreement said they weren't providing any services. All right? So get emails with permission for you to interact directly with their clients. Some of these fee-for-services, they'll provide extra services, but they won't provide all of them, and the agent will be involved enough to give you some a little bit of permission. Okay, so protect yourself in those cases of agency by implication. All right, pitfall number 2, mishandling earnest money. Let's talk about 3 things here. When do I collect earnest money? Well, look at your real estate purchase contract. It says when you have to collect it. In Utah, for example, we can say that we're collecting it as soon as we're writing the offer. We're collecting it right then on the spot, in which case we would sign and say that we've collected the earnest money. Or you can collect it within 4 days of acceptance. Now, that's personally how I do it. I don't want to be handling somebody else's money if I don't have a contract. So I collect the earnest money within 4 days of acceptance. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. You can collect it yourself. Since I have all the earnest money go to the title company, and I believe that's Equity's policy all over the place, I actually direct my client to the title company to deposit it. So rather than me collect a check at all, I just always direct them, all right, we're accepted, we're under contract, we've got 4 days to get that earnest money turned in. Here are the addresses of title companies near you where you can turn it in, because we have it written in the contract, earnest money to deposited with XYZ title company in accordance with state law, right? So I look up XYZ title companies, I find their addresses, send that to my client and say, take it to these guys. I call my contact there and say, be aware this is going to be coming. Here's a copy of our receipt form that I'm going to need to turn in later on. And if you don't know where that is, that's in the Equity Archive in the buyer packet, okay, is the earnest money receipt form. So I send that receipt form directly to the title company. They collect the earnest money, they fill out the receipt, they email me a copy of it, and I'm done. And occasionally the seller will call me and say, hey, you need to sign page 1 of the real estate purchase contract showing that you've received the earnest money. And I say, no, I'm not going to sign that. I did not receive the earnest money. You've got a copy of the receipt that the title company received it, which is what we all agreed to on Addendum 1. Everybody signed it. So no, I am not going to sign if I did not receive. All right? So when to collect? I do it within 4 days of acceptance, but do whatever your purchase contract says. Where to deposit it with the title company, and make sure in your addendum you've got language reflecting that. Earnest money to be deposited with XYZ title company in accordance with state law is the language that you need to use. And what happens if that check bounces or your client never goes and deposits it? And this was a question that came up yesterday amongst my agents as well. $10,000 earnest money. It was a big home, $1 million home, $10,000 in earnest money, and the client never deposited it. Well, what happens if they never deposit it or if the check bounces? If the check bounces, title company will call you, the buyer's agent, and inform you that it bounced. What do you have to do? What is your obligation? Well, if you have enough time before that 4 days after acceptance is up, if that's what you've got in your contract, call your client up and say, hey, that bounced. Can you get another check in right away? You know, we can still meet our 4-day deadline. But if you can't meet that deadline, you have the affirmative duty, meaning you've got to take action here, to contact the listing agent and tell him our check bounced or my client didn't get the earnest money to me. We didn't get it in. And I'm still working on it. I don't think it's going to kill the deal. I think I can get it within this week, but we don't have it now. Okay, and I would put that again in writing. I would put it in an email and save a copy of it so that I can prove that I've sent that email notifying the other party that the earnest money isn't there. Now, does that automatically kill the deal? No, it doesn't. It does make it voidable, but it doesn't make it void automatically. Voidable means that the buyer or the seller could look at that and say, hey, we don't have any earnest money, so we're canceling the contract based on a breach of contract. These guys said they would give us earnest money. They didn't. Contract's void. Okay, so they can void it if they want to, but it doesn't automatically make it void. If the parties proceed, then it's basically at the seller's risk. Okay, so if that check bounces, it was never deposited, but they go ahead and proceed with the transaction, that's on them. Okay, you can prove that you told them they want to proceed. That's on them. Okay, so that's how to handle earnest money. Any questions on that so far? If you have questions, by the way, you can type them in. I've got everybody muted out here. Let's go on to the next one, operating with an expired license. This happens all the time, guys, and the solution is very simple. Know how to check the expiration date on your license and stay current on your CE classes. Trying to cram a lot of hours into the last couple days of the month does not work, and I have agents get caught by this almost every month. So, how do you check the expiration date on your license? Well, you may carry a copy of it in your wallet. You may have a wall license that you've got, but you should be able to log into the Division of Real Estate's website. In Utah, every agent can manage their license by logging into the Division of Real Estate's website. If you've never done this, go do it today to see how it works. You can see your CE classes that you've got credit for. You can see when your license expires. You can verify that the state has your correct home address and contact information. All of these things are very important for you to know and stay on top of it. Now, one agent has typed in here, our broker holds our license. Can we request a copy of it? Absolutely. If you don't have a copy in your possession, ask your broker for it. And they should give you a copy. But you should not just know your expiration date. You should know how many CE classes you've had up till now, how much more is required for you to renew your license. I'll just give you an example of how it works in Utah. We've got to have 18 credit hours of CE every 2 years. 9 of those have to be core credit hours. Now, the division, when we take a CE class, the CE provider or instructor is in charge of reporting those hours to the division. If they don't get reported to the division, it's as if we never took the class. And so after taking a CE class, the instructor usually gives us a little half-page form, a little thing saying that we took it. If you provide the division with copies of those, they won't acknowledge them. So what I do is I hold on to that little half page. I wait 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, and then I log on to the division website and make sure that that class was posted. I want to take action on that right away. I don't want to wait 1.5 years before finding out that the CE instructor never posted me for having credit for the class, because at that point he's probably lost all his records. But if I wait 3 or 4 days to a week, then I can make sure it's been posted and that I've got credit for it. Okay, because here in Utah, the division only cares what's been posted. They don't care about little papers that you have floating around. It's got to be posted. Now, how long does it take to post? Well, it can take a week after you take a CE class. Now, you can take classes online or in person, but it can still take up to a week to report. And so the division says, get all of your hours done by the 15th of the month to make sure that they have a week or so to report and get active on the division's website, and then they'll allow you to renew your license. But if you're looking it up and pounding in 8 hours a day the last couple of days of the month, your license is going to expire and you're going to incur some extra fees. Plus, your broker can't pay you. Plus, you can't have any active listings or buyers that you're working with because you've got an expired license. And if you do continue to work with them, you can have some really big fines. So understand how that works. Go in, check your CE hours, and stay on top of it. Okay? That one's an easy one to fix, and yet it affects all of us. Okay, money problems, and these come in a variety of forms, so let's handle them separately. Beware builders in sheep's clothing. Okay? Builders first. Most builders are great to work with. They know that realtors are their bread and butter. They treat us really well, but occasionally builders are not very professional. Okay, they haven't been on our side of the fence. They've got the same real estate license we do, but oftentimes they haven't operated as we have, and so they take some of these things for granted. The builder provides them with their own copies of forms. It's not necessarily the same that we use, so they're using different paperwork than we have, and they don't realize the types of rules that we have to do to maintain our license, because they're acting more as an employee rather than a self-employed individual, and thus they're not as motivated as we are to maybe keep the rules. And just be aware of who it is that you're working with. And if they fall into that category of builder, you need to take some extra steps. For example, a builder that I worked with, I went down, sat with them, and they did not have the home listed on the MLS. Well, the MLS is what tells me I'm going to get paid. Per the terms of the MLS, if a listing agent lists a property there, they have to advertise how much they're going to pay a buyer's agent, that buyer agent commission. And if they fail to pay that commission, the MLS will enforce it, okay, on their broker. And the MLS carries a big stick. So that's what says I'm going to get paid my commission. What if I show homes that are a builder's homes? Or I could show homes in another MLS that I'm not a member of. Like, for example, if I drove up to Park City, Utah, they've got a separate MLS. And if I'm showing homes up there that aren't listed in my MLS, I have no guarantee that I'm going to get paid. I could do all the paperwork all the way through to closing and not get a check for it. And I could go after the agent and say, hey, you owe me money. He says, why? Where does it say I owe you money? Well, a builder can pull the same trick on you. So I sat down with this builder. We filled out all the paperwork, and I said, do you not have a commission form? And he said, no, we don't need one. Right here in the contract, it says that you're representing them. I said, well, sure, it says I'm representing them. It doesn't say you're going to pay me. I said, I need this form signed. And so I brought a form to him to sign. He didn't sign it. It took him a couple of weeks, and I called up my client, and I said, hey, I need you to put pressure on these guys because otherwise you're left holding the bag. So my client called him and said, hey, get that form signed right now. And we put some pressure on him. But some builders are not as professional as others. Again, most of them are great. They treat us well, but be aware and get those forms signed. When in doubt, write it out. If ever there's a question on what it is that's included in the sale of a home, write it out. Please don't write in there in your purchase contract as per MLS. Okay? It's a cheap, lazy way out, and that's not what people are paying us to do. If a fridge is included, write it out. There's a fridge included. Okay? Put all the terms in writing. That'll protect you a lot. All right. On to short sales. Quite often we see this language, commission to be split 50-50. You know, if this is a short sale, the bank may not decide to pay us the whole commission, so they've got typed in agent remarks, commission to be split 50-50. And yet, where we look at the buyer agent commission notes, it says 3%. So who wins? The deal closes, the MLS said we'd get 3%, the agent remarks said we'd split whatever commission came in 50-50. What gets paid? If the bank only paid 5%, do we get paid 2.5% or do we get paid 3%? What do you guys think? For all of you that think we get 3%, click the button to raise your hand. If, because the bank only paid 5% and the comment says commission to be split 50-50, if you think it's 2%. Okay, so let's wait for those 3%ers. If you think that we get paid 3%, click the little button. It looks like a hand with an arrow on it on your webinar dashboard. Raise your hand if you think we'll get paid the 3%. Okay, I'll lower the hands. If you think we'll get paid 2.5% because of that comment there, commission to be split 50-50, then raise your hand. Okay, I'll go ahead and lower the hands now. And one of you got it right. Okay. In the words of the state attorney, what the BAC giveth, the agent comments cannot taketh away. He tried to make it sound biblical or something. But if you're a short sale agent and you list a 3% buyer agent commission, regardless of what you type in your comments, you're going to have to pay a 3% buyer agent commission. Okay? So how do you remedy this? Well, you could put 2.5% to 3% in your buyer agent commission. If you're not sure the bank's going to pay you a full 6%, you can write in 2.5% to 3%. But if you put 3%, you're going to pay 3%. All right? If you have questions on that, type them in. Let me know, because I know most people got that, had a misunderstanding on that. They got that wrong. All right. Can we get paid directly by a client? Let's say that, well, here's a situation, a real-life situation that happened recently. One of my agents did a deal for a client, and I think it was one of these splits where somebody was only paying them 2.5%. And the agent mentioned that to the client. They said, I think you're worth the full 3%. And so the buyer got paid 2.5% by the listing agent, and their client, the buyers themselves, wrote out another check to that agent for 0.5%. Is that legal? Can we do that? The answer is yes, that is legal. How does it have to be handled? Well, you can't have a check written directly to you. It has to go through your brokerage. Does Equity take a chunk of that? No, in this case, Equity just, there was a transaction fee associated because there was a transaction. So Equity took their transaction fee, but for that extra check that came in, there was no extra charge for that because that was associated with the same transaction. Now, what if there is no transaction? Let's say that for example, I had a listing last night, and the client said, there's a relocation company. Our company will pay for us to be relocated, and if they end up selling the home for us or whatever it was, he wasn't exactly sure how it worked. He said, if they end up selling the home, then you may not get paid. He said, however, we don't feel like that would be right. If you're going to list the home, even if they pull it away from us and sell it themselves or something, we want you to get paid for your time. So let's say that there's no file, there's no transaction. Can I still get paid? Is that legal? Can he just pay me, even though I would basically close the file without a closing ever taking place? And the answer is yes, he can pay me. What would I turn into Equity? I would turn in everything that I have. If I took a listing agreement and it didn't end up closing, maybe they decided not to sell and felt bad for me, yeah, I'm going to still turn that into Equity. And I'll call my broker at that point and say, it's not really a transaction, there's no commission, but they wanted to pay me for my time. How much are you going to take? And Equity will always do something fair for you. But yeah, you can do that. Again, the check has to be made out to Equity Real Estate, not to me personally. And it has to go through corporate, and I get paid from there. All right, some questions have been typed in. Let's okay. Does an agent bonus bypass the broker? No. Any money paid to the agent has to go through the broker. All right? And then the question is it paid as a commission or as a bonus? It doesn't matter. It's all associated with one file, so you only pay one transaction fee for that file. So whether it's added on whether you call it a commission or a bonus, if it's associated with one file, there's only one transaction fee taken away, and you could get paid 4 or 5%, whatever you wanted to get paid. There's only one transaction fee per transaction. So if you do get paid extra, good for you. All right, hopefully I answered those questions for you. All right, let's talk about referral fees. How much is too much, and does the form of payment matter? Well, a referral fee, let's say that I've got a friend, John, and he refers me to Susie, his sister. So John's a past client of mine. He knows that I've done a good job for him in the past. Calls me up and says, hey, Susie, my sister, is considering selling a home. Here's her contact information. Give her a call. John's the referor. How much can I pay him legally? Now, your state may differ from Utah, so check with your broker if you're not sure of this rule. In Utah, it used to be $50, and a lot of agents are operating under that misunderstanding. It has been changed to $150. So I can give John $150 for referring me to his sister, Susie. All right? Does the form of payment matter? Yes, it does. There are some laws that state that we can't share our commissions with unlicensed individuals. And so I try to never, ever give cash, okay, because cash could be misconstrued as an illegal sharing of commissions, all right? So if John refers somebody to me, I'm not going to give him $150 cash. I'll give him a $150 gift card. It works the same as cash for him. He's just as grateful as if it were cash, but it doesn't run the risk of me running afoul of the Division of Real Estate claiming that I've illegally shared commissions, okay? So I'm going to give a gift card, and I can do up to $150, or I can buy an actual gift, okay? I cannot give more than $150 for a referral. However, Susie, my new client, ends up, let's say she's a buyer, She ends up buying a home, and I give my buyers a nice gift. I take them on a $250 to $500 shopping spree at a store of their choice. And sometimes we're buying groceries, sometimes we're buying decorations, and sometimes we head to Lowe's and buy hoses and grills and that kind of stuff, okay? I don't care where we go, but the bottom line is I'm giving more than $150. Does that matter? Well, in this case, this isn't for a referral. This is for a client. I already paid John his $150 referral fee. This is now Susie, my client. I can give them whatever kind of gift I want to, as long as it meets certain requirements. So here I'm going to take you to a copy of our state law. Now you'll want to check with your state or your broker and find out what your law says about this, okay? Here is the law actually right here. Affirmative duties required by all licensed individuals states that when offering an inducement to a buyer who will not pay a real estate commission in a transaction, in other words, if I'm representing a buyer, they're not paying the real estate commission, I'm getting paid by the listing agent. The agent representing the buyer, the non-paying client, must A, obtain authorization from the licensee's principal broker. In other words, does equity allow you to do this? And the answer is yes, and it's right here, okay? B, comply with underwriting guidelines that apply to the loan. In other words, is what I'm offering going to comply with the underwriter's guidelines? If I give cash, no, it won't. Okay, so talk to your loan officer and say, hey, I give my client a gift. I take them on a little shopping spree. Do you guys have a problem with that? And 99 times out of 100, they're going to say, no, we don't care if you take them on a shopping spree. If you say, I give my client $250 cash as a closing gift, 99 times out of 100, they'll say, no, you can't do that. Okay? So make sure it complies with underwriting guidelines. Provide notice of the inducement using any method or form to either the seller or the broker of the seller. All right? So now we've got the form that Equity created to handle this situation. In the event an equity agent offers a gift or inducement to their client not paying a real estate commission, this form shall serve as the equity agent's principal broker's authorization to offer the inducement. In other words, this meets step A. Okay, and then the agent checks and signs. I acknowledge that this does not violate underwriting guidelines. Okay, I acknowledge that I've provided a copy of this gift to the principal broker, or if it's a for sale by owner, to the seller. And I acknowledge that I'm not giving cash because that could be construed as an illegal sharing of commissions. Boom, I've got all of these. I include this in my packet, and I sign myself. I don't need to have the other guy's signature. I just need to show that I've sent it. Okay? And boom, we're done. All right? Pretty simple, easy to handle. I can give gifts to my clients. All right. So we've covered all of those questions. Are there any other questions that you guys have? These are the kinds of things that I've seen most frequently pop up in our quarterly newsletter. Are there things that you guys have seen that you would like to ask questions on? And I'll pause just a moment here while you guys take down these notes as where to look up the YouTube channel. By the way, if you do go to the YouTube channel, just go ahead and subscribe to it. All right? That way, if I upload any new videos, you'll get automatically notified of those. And it'll be easier for you to find the next time you log on to YouTube to look at other videos. Okay, I don't see any questions being typed in. If you do have some other things that you would like me to cover, other training topics, other issues, please feel free to email me. eric.lee@equityutah.com is my email address, and I look forward to hearing from you or seeing you online next week. Thank you all, and have a good weekend.